things are hard. They don't get easier until you get harder. And until you learn how to deal with those things. They're arguing and they're mad. And then you have the adult come over who creates a different kind of water for them. And then they intervene somehow. And when they intervene somehow, that kid has now learned a lesson. Whenever there's a problem, we just yell and scream and shout, and then an authority figure will step in and reset everything. The kids who are winning don't need the authority figures to come over. It's the kids who are losing who really want the authority figure to come over to reset things so that they can try again. So here's the best thing that you do. You stay out of it. Unless the kids are stabbing each other, of course, stay out of it. What's going to happen? Well, they're going to figure it out. Why? Because they want to keep playing. So how is it that the pessimist sees the rest of the world? Misanthropically, probably. Everybody else is out for themselves. They're all, selfish and greedy and blah, blah. Essentially, it's the pessimist is the person who holds the mirror up to their own face, but makes the mistake of thinking it's a window. So if I were to ask you, hey, so how's the air you're breathing? How's the air? You might say something like, oh, it's polluted. You can see the pollution. You can actually walk through like a cloud of gray and actually taste it and everything. Well, no. We just happen to know. Okay, but what's the air like that you can see, that you can interact with? I had no idea. I don't even notice it. In fact, you could go your entire life. Millions, hundreds of millions of people probably did, never knowing anything about what oxygen is. You might wonder why the trees bristle once in a while. But the point is that sometimes things in our lives are so obvious that we don't even notice it. The old fish swims up next to the young fish and asks him, how's the air? How's the water? They have no idea, because it's what they've swam in their entire lives. And so from time to time, I'm going to ask you that question, so how's the water? How's the water? And what I mean by that is, how's the environment in which we're living? When we say things like, people who are from abusive households think that that's just normal, and then they end up in abusive households and create abusive households. Why? Because that's the water that they're swimming in. There's a lot of water that we're swimming in that we don't even recognize. And part of the point of these quotes is to get us thinking about things that oftentimes are so obvious, but without an understanding of them, we don't really see how the world operates, and then therefore we certainly don't see how we operate in the world. So I asked this question, and pessimist is a man who thinks everybody is as nasty as himself. I'm asking, why would a pessimist think that everybody is as nasty as they are? Because how does a pessimist see the world? How does a pessimist see people? Does a pessimist walk around and say, man, I just love people. I love humanity. You know what I love? Humans. Humans. There's another word that is also pretty fitting, especially for today. A misanthrope. Misanthrope. A misanthrope is a person who doesn't like people. That's the person who wakes up and is like, oh man, people, and they always get annoyed by people. They always get irritated by people. It's like, yeah, but that's what we're from. We're all people, So miss doesn't like anthropic, from humans. Oftentimes, pessimistic people are misanthropic. It's like I'm thinking about. I haven't seen them so much this year, but during the last election cycle, for example, I remember seeing these bumper stickers. People have bumper stickers that'll say like, Trump 2020, Biden 2020, Harris, whatever, 2024. I would see these bumper stickers on cars that would say, Intergalactic Meteor 2020. Meaning, oh man, I just hope an asteroid comes and just wipes us all out. It's like, really? You really want a meteor to just destroy the world? That's where I keep all my stuff. Probably you too. You want somebody to just come along and wipe all that. Everybody you love is in the world. So you want just the world to get wiped out. Well, not just I don't know, man, just the stupid people. Just the stupid people. How many stupid people are there? Billions? I bet it's probably not as many as you think. Because people by nature are overwhelmingly average. Most people are not stupid. Most people do things that you wouldn't do. Most people do things that you wouldn't think to do. Most people are raised in different ways with different values, different ideas. A lot of times it's our I that makes people stupid. And, oh my God, why would you even do that? And I was like, all right, any of you, like I heard something, for example, any of you guys in here, the guys particularly, know how to change a tire? Okay, one dude. Two, you're not. I had a friend of mine like a year ago or so say, man, these kids coming up today, they're not even boys anymore, they're just girls. Like, and he's an older guy. I'm like, what do you mean by that? He said, they can't even change tires. I go, why would they know how? Well, dude, that's something that every guy should know. Okay, I hear what you just said, you just repeat yourself, but why would they know? How would you know? No one's ever shown them, never had to. Most places have roadside assistance now. So unless you you only know how to, like how did you learn?
I don't learn with my dad.
Yeah, guess how I learned? No, I'm trying to find my dad. No, that's how most people learn. But here's actually how I did learn. When I was a little kid, if something went wrong in my house, like for example, my plumbing, I remember one time my drain backed up, and I went to my dad and told my dad, hey, the plumbing has backed up. And he said, you should fix that. I was like 10 or something like that, 9. I was a little kid. And I go, how do I fix it? And he said, well, go get the tools. And I went and got a toolbox, and I sat there, and he said, all right, figure it out. And I was like, whatever I was, like 9 or 10 years old, I'm sitting there going like, huh? And he's like, well, think about it, figure it out. When stuff goes down the drain, where does it go? So where's the clog probably? And so when I was a little kid, I was trying to change this thing out. If any of you have ever tried to, if any of you guys know anything about plumbing at all, when a drain backs up, there's a whole bunch of water that gets stuck in the pipe underneath. So after a while, I finally figured out I can undo the fastens, take out the pipe. And when I did that, water just goes all over the place. And my dad is sitting there watching me, and he said, what do you suppose you should have done? I said, I guess gotten a bucket or an old towel to catch it. And he goes, yeah, so now you know for next time. In other words, I messed up a lot of stuff when I was growing up as a little kid. And my dad wasn't lazy. He wasn't just like, I'm gonna go watch television, you can do it. He would sit there and he'd watch me try to figure these things out. And so that means that when I grew up, I was developed into an extreme ability to be willing to take risks on trying to fix things. That's good, I suppose, but if any of you are ever on an airplane with me and they say, oh, the pilot is passed out, can anyone fly this plane? I'm that guy who's like, I can do it. You can fly it. Hell yeah, dude, how hard can it be? I played video games growing up, I know how to fly a plane. You can do this, dude. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I can do this. Why? Because I remember the only time that I remember my dad ever stepping in and stopping me from doing something was when I was changing a light switch on a wall. I was like 11 or 12, and he said, all right, I'm gonna step in because this might save your life. Turn off the circuit breaker first. And he showed me how to go over and turn off the circuit breaker so that I wouldn't get electrocuted changing a light switch. And then after that, I kind of figured it out. You just kind of realize where wires go, and you can see them and see how they're spliced and everything. So I was raised with an ability to figure things out. So how did I change my first tire? I got a flat tire, and I looked at it and said, I can do this. In other words, I see people change tires all the time. I figured out how to change my first flat tire because my tire was flat. Opened up my trunk, had the thing in there, and but basically, yeah, from my dad, because I learned that skill growing up. Think about how it is that we behave with you now. Whenever there's something wrong, is there not just a group of people kind of hovered around trying to make sure that they can fix things for you largely? And if you think if that is your life, then what happens is that becomes the water that you're swimming in. You think that that's just kind of how the world operates. We're all supposed to just like fix things for people. Or worse yet, there's people who can fix things for us. And we should always look to the people who can fix things for us rather than fix them ourselves. And if that's the case, well then my goodness, no wonder so many people think they have social anxiety and other kinds of anxieties. Because the world's a desperately scary place for you. Because you've never really figured things out for yourself. When you realize that the world it's challenging, but it's less challenging if you learn how to operate within it. You know, I have people who I mentioned before, I have students who will send me an email through Jupiter, a message through Jupiter, asking me a question, and they're sitting in the room with me. And then I'll call them over and ask them, why would you send me a message? You're in the room with me. Oh, I'm just not, I just can't talk to people. Yeah, I know you can't because you haven't practiced it. Of course, it's not easy to do for a lot of people. So does that mean therefore we should make the world easier for you? Or does that mean that therefore we should help you to understand that things are difficult, but they don't get easier until you get harder? Things are hard. They don't get easier until you get harder. Meaning until you learn how to deal with those things. In other words, if we're constantly compensating for the people around us and doing things for them, they never get better at doing them themselves. Now there are times, of course, that you should step in and help. Someone's bleeding out in the middle of the street, after a car accident. Don't just look at them and go, "Help yourself, bro." Here's the med pack. Here's the tourniquet. Fix yourself. But kind of like knowing where those differences are. It's like, I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I remember mentioning it to a couple of classes last week. I don't remember if I mentioned it to your class, but one of my rules for myself is I don't interrupt kids when they're playing. Did I mention that to you guys already? I talked about that? If you ever see kids at a picnic, or like even if you go to McDonald's and you see the kids in the play pit and they start playing a game, look at how things happen. You usually have like some of the older kids who come in and then they kind of like say, "Let's play a game of whatever." And then they'll establish the rules and then they start playing. And when kids start playing, and especially if they're playing a game where there's winners and losers, what eventually, inevitably happens, you've got some kids who are starting to lose. You're cheaters! And we think that's just, oh my God, that's so funny. That's terrible. You're teaching them, and somehow they've learned the lesson that the only way somebody wins is if they're cheating. And you don't think that lesson follows them through life? You hear it constantly all the time now. The only reason the rich people are rich is because they cheated somehow. They stole their money. They did this, they did that. Isn't it possible they also did it ethically and honorably? No. They're just all corrupt. That's the same little kid who sat there in the park and accused the sixth graders of cheating because they were losing. It's the same mentality. Why don't they notice it? It's the water that they're swimming in. They just think that's just normal. But when you interrupt kids when they're playing, you've created a different kind of water for them to swim in. They're fighting, they're arguing. And I don't mean like they're fighting, like they're stabbing each other. I just mean like they're yelling at each other, they're arguing and they're mad. And then you have the adult come over who creates a different kind of water for them. All right, so what happened? Well, they did this and then everyone starts yelling at each other. Okay, stop. All right, and then here's what we're gonna do. And then they intervene somehow. And when they intervene somehow, that kid has now learned a lesson. Whenever there's a problem, we just yell and scream and shout, and then an authority figure will step in and reset everything. The kids who are winning don't need the authority figures to come over. It's the kids who are losing who really want the authority figure to come over to reset things so that they can try again. So here's the best thing that you do. You stay out of it. Unless the kids are stabbing each other, of course, stay out of it. What's going to happen? Well, they're going to figure it out. Why? Because they want to keep playing. And because they want to keep playing, they figure things out. And then once they learn how to figure things out on that scale, then another scale, and then they grow up and they become those independent people. Otherwise, it's just the water that we swim in. Like I asked you guys today, if somebody walks up to you and punches you in the face, what are you supposed to do? Walking down the hallway here, someone punches you in the face, what do you do? No. What's wrong with you guys? Punch him back. Clutch my imaginary pearls. Right, violence is never the answer. What should you do? Tell someone about it. Yes, and then we can get together. We have a peer mediation to find out how your felt needs were violated. What caused you in your background to choose violence today? And I help you to understand that violence is never the answer. And I can walk away and go, good person. It's like we have forgotten somehow what it was like to be kids. Is it good for people for kids to fight sometimes? Yeah. Why? I mean, it works things out. It works things out. Now, I'm not saying if you see someone in full mountain just dropping bombs on someone's face until they hit the concrete, you don't do that either. I mean, obviously there's limits to things. But there's so many of us who are just so averse to violence where it's like, oh my, but I don't want to get my butt kicked. Well, nobody does. Of course nobody does. But when you do, you learn something about yourself. And then what happens when you win that fight? You walk around like, yeah, that's right. Then you find somebody else who then, of course, beats you up because that's the way things work. You establish these orders. But that's one of the ways in which you work things out. If you don't sort those things out, then they don't get sorted out. And I know we think that, I'm sorry, I know none of us really believes this, I get that. But what we say is, well, we have to, help them find another way. Yeah, fighting should be the last resort, of course, because you never know. You're fighting with somebody, even if you punch them and you're like, yeah, and the guy falls down, and you're backing up, or even if you're advancing and you trip and fall and you hit your head, and all of a sudden you're in a coma for the rest of your life. And you come out of the coma and you're basically a talking monkey because of all the brain damage. Just stuff like that just happens sometimes when people fight. It's not a great thing, but I guess you learn something you couldn't have learned any other way. But if any of you guys grew up in neighborhoods where violence was kind of like the norm, like where I grew up, most of my friends today are dead, or in jail, or they're in rehab. It would be a strange day it'd be a strange week if you didn't see people fighting once in a while. And you see people fighting, and then at the same liquor store, and then you come back a week later and they're talking. They're best of friends. Why? Because that's what happens. That's the water that they're swimming in. So I guess what I'm saying is that maybe it's worthwhile figuring out what kind of water we want to create. We can't change the whole lake. But we can change the parts of it that we're swimming in. Maybe we can ask ourselves, what kind of water do we want to create? It's dangerous, by the way, to create the water where we do eventually say, you know what, you get punched in the face, you go find an authority figure. Because the world is full of people who are going to punch you in the face. There are countries who want to punch our country in the face. There are people who want to punch you in the face because of your religious beliefs, something. And you have to be willing to fight back against that. It doesn't just mean always punching, always going at it that way, but being able to stand up for things. You can kind of make that the water that you're swimming in. So how is it that the pessimist sees the rest of the world? Misanthropically, probably. Everybody else is out for themselves. They're all, selfish and greedy and blah, blah. Essentially, it's the pessimist is the person who holds the mirror up to their own face, but makes the mistake of thinking it's a window. Oh my God, you guys are all so terrible, horrible. You guys are just out for yourselves. You're just nasty, ugly figures. Nobody cares about anybody else. And you don't even realize that you're holding a mirror to yourself. You think it's a window that you're seeing everybody else through. And then we end up hating them for it. Because what we truly hate ultimately is ourselves in that case. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms?